Good afternoon. My name is Timothy Myers. I am the Sarah and Ernest Butler Principal Conductor and Artistic Advisor at Austin Opera. I want to welcome you to this live episode of Live from Indy Terrace. Today is the second of some episodes that are very dear to me because it explores something very important, which is the orchestra. And we've been having a wonderful time getting to know various aspects of the orchestra and how they contribute and really drive the drama in an opera performance. And we are doing that by getting to know some of our orchestra musicians individually. So we're meeting some of these wonderful members of our orchestra. We're hearing about them as musicians, and we're gaining a lot more insight into the important role of the orchestra. Last week, we had a really fascinating conversation with our principal oboe, Ian Davidson. And if you missed that, I want to encourage you to go to our YouTube or Facebook page and check it out. Before we get into this episode, I want to express gratitude to our lead community and education sponsor, HEB, and our special sponsors for this episode, our wonderful friends, Jim and Joe Green. We are live today, which means that at the end, you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions of our guest. If you'd like to ask a question, please don't be shy. You may post it in the comments on either the Facebook or YouTube feed of this broadcast, and we will pick some of those to give to our guest at the end. Today, I'm delighted to have with me an absolutely first-rate musician who has been with Austin Opera since our very first production ever. Which is really cool. In addition to Austin Opera, he's also the principal trumpet of the Austin Symphony and has performed with many other esteemed orchestras and ensembles throughout America. He teaches trumpet at Texas State University, Cedar Park High and middle schools, and holds a doctorate degree in music performance from UT Austin. Please welcome our principal trumpet of the Austin Opera Orchestra, Bob Cannon.
Hi, Tim.
Bob, it's great to see you. And I'm really excited that I actually get to see you in person a week from Monday when we have our first rehearsal for the All-Star concert, which is a really great program. And I'm excited to see all of you and put this together for our audience. It's going to be really wonderful.
Yeah.
You and I had a great conversation earlier in the week, just going through what some of the things we wanted to talk about and the amazing excerpts that you selected. But I want to hear more about your experience since day one of Austin Opera in the orchestra. How does that feel now? How many years has that been, and how does it feel now?
Well, I've lost track of how many years because I think we started in 1987. I can't count that high. I think Bev Fratelli, who is our great flutist and piccolo player and our personnel manager, and I are the only ones that have done all the operas without missing one since then. And, it's just been a joy to do it. I can't believe it's gone so fast. But one thing that comes to mind is when we have rehearsals in the rehearsal hall at the Austin Opera building, there's a giant picture of Walter DeClue and his wife. And every time I see that, it just warms my heart because I remember all the great times and the great memories every time I see that, and remember the start. And I've just been so blessed to be a part of it the whole way. I started out as second trumpet or assistant principal, and I was in that role for a long time, playing with a great trumpet player in front of me, Bernie Nero. And then around 2004 or so, I started playing first trumpet and have since then. And it's just been such a great journey and, just great blessing for sure.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, we're really glad to have you. And that I view principal trumpet as really one of the most important positions in the orchestra. And so it's great to have a wonderful player like yourself there, and also someone who we can really talk. And we met very early on when I first started working in Austin as the artistic advisor, and have had a chance to develop that relationship. So I'm looking forward to continuing that. Tell me about What's your brief background? I know it's not a brief background with the trumpet, but the elevator pitch version of when did you start playing? How did that come about? When did you make the decision to become a professional player?
Well, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and in Kentucky, they start kids early in band. And I started, I think it was in 4th grade in elementary school, that early. And I remember some players came in 3rd grade to introduce instruments, and I saw this man with a silver trumpet, and I just fell in love immediately. I guess, we're all kind of destined, or I like to think that there's something in our brains that cue us as to what to do in life. And I think somebody was in my brain saying, hey, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And the way he played was amazing. So I chose that instrument and played it all through, under middle school and high school. And I guess it was in high school I was able to get pretty good at it. And I was able to get a good scholarship to the University of Louisville in Kentucky, and that's where I did my undergraduate degree. And I had a fantastic teacher there who was principal in the Louisville Orchestra, and he was my hero. And I started watching him in high school. I went to all the concerts, and he was principal in the opera there as well, and a thing called the Bach Society that did a lot of choral works by Bach. And I went to as many concerts as I could back in those days, and it just thrilled me. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I kind of got the bug.
Yeah.
I just tried my best to make it happen over the years.
You really had a calling.
Yeah, I think so.
And how does that translate then into opera? Do you remember the first one you heard, the first one you played? How did you get that bug?
Well, I think I don't remember exactly the first one I heard. I was pretty good as a kid in college going to concerts, and I went to a number of things. And one of the things I would attend was they always had student tickets for I think it was Kentucky Opera, which is in Louisville. And the one that sticks in my mind that probably was one of the first ones I saw was Richard Strauss' Salome, which is pretty heavy duty opera to experience as one of your first operas.
0 to 60.
As a trumpet player, it blew my mind.
Yeah.
Not only from the trumpet player aspect, but the whole thing, how it came together and the intensity of it. And, what opera does, it just brings everything together. What did Wagner call it? Gesamtkunstwerk or something like that.
Gesamtkunstwerk.
I always use that when people sneeze.
Yeah.
Instead of Gesundheit.
Yeah.
I said Gesamtkunstwerk. But anyway, that's the cool thing about opera. When it all comes together, it's like the meeting of all art forms.
Yeah.
And it's just so exciting. I think the first one I ever played was, I was really lucky. My trumpet teacher counseled me to go to Interlaken in the summertime. It was called the National Music Camp back then. In Northern Michigan, there's this great music camp in the summers. And I played in the university orchestra. And I know the first opera I ever played was there, and it was Marriage of Figaro by Mozart.
Amazing. And
for Mozart, the trumpet parts aren't all that interesting, and you do a lot of sitting, a lot of counting of breaths, and a lot of just sitting in the dark, twiddling your thumbs. But to hear the music itself, if you love music, you have to be just enthralled with it, and it wove its magic on me for sure.
Yeah.
And I'll just never forget that. My dad was a singer. And I grew up in choirs, singing choirs. So I think I've always been drawn to singing. And I always heard him as a soloist sing around town and at our church. And I was just enthralled by these amazing singers that could make these amazing sounds up on stage. Singing Mozart, just so beautiful and from another planet almost, So I think that's what the first opera was I heard or I played.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a masterpiece. That'll be kind of full circle then this coming fall when we do the Marriage of Figaro in Austin to for you to come back to that. That's exciting.
Yeah, Mary Jo Figaro.
There you go. I also love that people are getting a sense of the different styles of humor that are throughout the orchestra. It's one of the things I love most is that different sections of an orchestra definitely have different personalities, and it's really fun to get to know them. You've chosen some amazing excerpts today, so I want to get into that because you've also got a lot of really cool things that you want to talk about within those. So the first excerpts that you chose were from Carmen, and we've got 3 little snippets here, and I want to talk about each of them kind of as we go because there are different things that you want us to listen for in here. So the first one, and actually this is going to be on our part of this is going to be on our All-Star concert. And this is an interesting excerpt from the beginning, from the prelude to Carmen. Why did you choose this excerpt for us to hear?
Well, I just find there's so much richness in Carmen and the music, but also in the trumpet part. There's just a lot to do, a lot of fun stuff. This particular excerpt, it takes place in the overture, and Bizet used it, I think, in a way of foreshadowing for what was to come, and that many composers have done before and since. But it's just so effective in the way that he did it. And this particular excerpt is difficult on the trumpet. It's very low. It's in a register that we don't play really all that often. And as a result, it's put on many audition lists for both symphony positions and opera positions. It's hard to play it in tune. It's doubled with the other trumpet and with a number of other lower instruments.
Yes.
It actually has a note that for us is off the instrument. It's got what's called a pedal F that we have to negotiate in some way. And it's difficult to make it sound good, but it's challenging, but it's just so cool and fun to play. It's intensity at the utmost.
It's an unexpected color. You're doubled here with the cello, bassoon, and clarinet. And so it's interesting in that I want people can listen and hear how the trumpet brings an interesting color and a depth to the sound here that's really wonderful from an orchestration standpoint. So let's hear this. This is an excerpt from the Prelude to Carmen. And of course, we left you there with no resolution to the harmony. It's amazing. That's great. I love the color of that and that combination of instruments. It's really, and there's something about the trumpet that you just hear kind of the sheen on top of the sound that, like you said, gives it that really ominous feel. The next one that you chose is from still in the first act, pretty early on in Carmen. And I'm curious why you chose this. This involves some trumpet calls, which is very interesting.
Well, it's just something that as trumpet players, everything kind of stems back to being a bugle player. And you have to be able to play calls, just like a bugle player, from military bands, play marches, things like that. And it's just a very exuberant part of the opera. You'll hear a trumpet player make a fanfare from the distance, which is a really cool effect. And then another one will answer that a little closer, signaling military band, I would assume, getting a little bit closer to the festivities. And it's just a really neat texture and great moment in the opera.
Great. And this is right before we see the children's chorus coming on in the first act of Carmen. So this is another little snippet from Act 1 of Carmen. Great. Really cool, because this starts to show us some of the things about how the orchestra has expanded in the use of an opera, right? Where we have antiphonal things, or one off stage and then one in the pit or on stage. It's a really interesting thing to see. This continues into our next excerpt, actually. We see another convention of how dramatically orchestral instruments are used to indicate something, right? Or to shift the momentum of a scene. And right here, we're in a scene with Don Jose and Carmen. Don Jose in the scene is sung by Chad Shelton, who was in our All-Star concert coming up, and Carmen is Sandy Eddy. And this is an interesting thing. She's not playing castanets in this production. She's using something else to play the rhythm, but it was traditionally castanets. But we hear these trumpet calls, and what happens in this scene with the trumpet?
Typically, this is a trumpet duet where the two trumpet players are sent from the pit and they go and play up backstage somewhere, which I've done a number of times. This particular production, we were asked to play very quietly in the pit, but it's supposed to depict a military band coming again from a distance. And then you can hear over the course of the aria, it gets closer and closer and closer. And then the band is right there. And then you can hear them kind of going away. It's a neat effect. I know there's a number of times where I've played it backstage where we would have to follow a TV monitor to follow the conductor. And that's very normal and typical of something that we have to do in the opera. And it's always challenging to get up and back in time and not be too out of breath, and be sure you hit the mark of playing the piece correctly. You know, it's definitely challenging.
There are a whole bunch of stories about when that hasn't gone well in various theaters. Well, this is a good, and this again is really cool how this completely changes the scene, right? Don Jose is really intoxicated with Carmen, and then all of a sudden he hears these trumpet calls, which reminded him of his responsibility. So here's this third excerpt from Carmen. Spoiler alert, Carmen is not pleased to be usurped by by the trumpets there, calling Don Jose away. The next excerpt that you've chose, we're moving on to Verdi now, which is very interesting. We've got a couple really great Verdi excerpts today. This first one is from Rigoletto. And again, it's as the first clip from Carmen we listened to is from the very beginning. This is the very first notes of the piece. And also something that has a dramatic purpose in the piece that is foreshadowing, but is also has some specific technical challenges. What should we be listening for here and understanding about the complexity of this, as simple as it sounds?
Well, yes, it sounds simple, but you're coming in unison, first trumpet and first trombone, in a very quiet texture, which is very challenging. It's very exposed. It takes a lot of control to enunciate the notes properly and get the proper response. It has quite a wide range of dynamic, going from extremely soft to very loud, and eventually features the whole brass section and the way it does do this foreshadowing of what's to come.
Great.
It can be a little terrifying, even though it is simple.
Yeah, for sure. And also that you've been warming up, undoubtedly, but it's still the first thing that you actually play. So it's not as though you've had some big tutti orchestral thing to kind of get into a groove and move. This is actually it. So it also requires some guts.
It's one of those excerpts where when I'm practicing it, I'll put my instrument down and go walk away for 5 or 10 minutes and then come back with no warm up, start it, and then go do that again
Smart.
And again, just to see what it's going to take to get it to respond.
Really interesting. Very interesting. Well, let's hear this excerpt now. unmistakable might of Verdi in that. I love the range of that excerpt. It's so, and it's beautifully executed too. Well done.
Thank you.
This next excerpt I'm excited about. You've chosen a couple from very recent. Well, the Rigoletto was a very recent season, but this one was 2 years ago this month, and was actually my conducting debut with Austin Opera. And this was Silent Night, which is a really incredible piece by Kevin Putz, who also has an Austin connection, and it's not only an incredible piece, but was also an incredibly compelling production and a terrific cast. You chose, we're going to actually show a fairly long, about 4 minute some excerpt here, which when we were putting it together, I started looking at how to trim it down, and I just couldn't find a way to do it because there's so much in here for the orchestra, and especially for the trumpet, I just didn't want to miss out on anything. So tell us some of the things. I'll just set the stage. This is the battle scene that we have in Act 1, and it's incredibly cinematic in scope as far as the staging, the orchestration. And what's very interesting is there are a few audio sound effects, digital sound effects that are in the scene, but nearly everything you hear that is in effect is something in the orchestra. And it's a testament to Kevin's abilities as an orchestrator, that he can really create this scene and all of the tension and all of the movement he wants in the sound and on the stage. He can really make it all happen aurally in a really scintillating way. Tell us about how the trumpets operate in the scene and some of the things that we should be listening for as we go through this.
Well, it starts out, it's really incredible the way it starts out. It's depicting World War I and in the trenches and 3 different forces. And it comes in and they're all singing simultaneously, I think in 3 different languages. Is that correct?
And meters, yes. And you have a connection to one of these armies.
Yeah. One of the reasons I chose this, besides the variety of it, was that Austin Opera asked us when we were in rehearsal if we had family members that were veterans, if we would come forward and just let them know so they could share our stories. And I'd always heard that my grandfather, my mom's dad, had been in World War I. And I didn't really know much more than that. They came from Scotland, and one of the groups in this opera is the Scottish Army. And so I did a little checking. One of the flute players, my great friend Adrian Inglis, who actually played on this production, is into Ancestry.com, and she did a little checking for me about my grandfather, and she found all this information that I had never seen before. And then I asked my aunt about it, and she sent me all the stuff she had found on Ancestry, and it turned out he had served in the Scottish Army in Egypt, and he was in the artillery. So I can't imagine what he would have done and seen in those years that he was there. I found out he won a number of medals that I had no idea about. And so when I first started watching this excerpt, it was emotional for me to see this. And of course, when I'm down in the pit, under the pit, I don't see anything.
Yeah.
So like Ian Davidson said last week, this is the first time I've ever seen any of this. And I was just, I was just so excited to be able to see it. And so that's the element of that. And the trumpet playing, while they're singing this, the trumpets and the brass play some kind of a march that's juxtaposed against all that. And to me, it really sounds like, if you're familiar with the music of Charles Ives, where he was just put layer upon layer upon layer of different things happening simultaneously. And then just after that, we get into the battle scene where the trumpets add to just the sounds of battle. We had to play these very high notes and bended notes and modern technical things that we don't normally play. Just to add, it almost sounds like the trumpets sound like bombs dropping at times with the whistles of the bombs. It was very challenging. And I think you'll find it effective.
Yeah, it's an amazing excerpt. So here is the battle scene. Well, coming into the battle scene, and then the battle scene from Act One of Silent Night. I love seeing that too. I have goosebumps, and I love seeing it because although I'm there in a position where I could see the stage, there's so much going on in that scene orchestrally, just to to tend to that it's nice to actually be able to watch it. Really incredible. Even there when he's shot at the end and then we hear the trumpet falls, as he's crashing to the ground. It's so incredibly orchestrated, I think. The next excerpt is also something from a living composer in a recent production, and this is from Everest. Music by Joby Talbot and libretto by Gene Shear. And this was a production that was designed by design. This was semi-staged. So it's really cool because you get the full impact of the orchestra with the orchestra right there behind the singers, and this really encompassing experience. Tell us why you chose this dramatically and also musically.
Well, again, I just really love the variety of it and the fact that it kind of does what Silent Night did, in that it just so transports you, even though the whole orchestra is on the stage and the singers are on the stage right in front of you. It takes you somewhere else, and it's very cinematic in a way. And I'm sitting here as I was looking at these videos just in my room on my laptop, and I was transported there. Again, it has some very challenging music for trumpet. To me, it's very similar to parts of Igor Stravinsky and reminds me parts of Rite of Spring.
Sure.
In both rhythmically and in the challenge of the trumpet writing. And that's why I chose it. Some very high notes, exposed things, and I think part of this depicts a storm.
Yes.
And that's the reason I chose it.
Great. Well, this is these are two short excerpts from Everest with the Austin Opera Orchestra, conducted by Joseph Mekovich. We certainly hear the influence of Stravinsky there, especially rhythmically in that excerpt. What an amazing context there that the orchestra sets in just the intensity. This is one of the really special things about the orchestra and their involvement in an opera is that scene would not have nearly that level of intensity without what the orchestra is doing there. We have one more excerpt, and this is one that we can't not do. And this is an oldie but a goodie, as they say. So this is from Act 2 of Verdi's Aida. This is in the triumphal march scene. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to hear.
Well, like you said, I had to choose this. We did this. When was this from? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I think it's 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. But it was just so good. I'm not one of the trumpet players. The trumpet players are on stage, and it's a toga party. So they're in togas. I was kind of happy I got to stay in the pit. But my colleagues, Kyle Karanka and Tim Schaefer and Joe Cooper, and I believe it was Jeff Missel was the fourth, got to be 2 and 2 on either side of the stage, playing these herald trumpets, which are these very long instruments, which are maybe 5 or 6 feet long, and they're very difficult to play. They're usually you have to play these things that have been sitting in cases for months, if not years.
Sure.
And they don't function very well. And those guys did an amazing job. You'll hear it, and it depicts, I think, a battle victory for the Egyptians, and it's just good old, opera.
That's right. That's the best way to say it. Yeah. Good. Here's from Act 2 of Verdi's Aida. That's so well played. It's with those fussy instruments and in unison there. It's really, really well done. Bob, it's been great to have you here. I think I'm going to just check in and see if we've got a question. I know we've got a couple questions here. We've got time for one question. I'm going to see if someone can chat that to me. This is a good one. Since you've experienced both in your work, what parallels have you found between playing the trumpet and singing?
Well, my trumpet teachers always taught me to sing on the trumpet. And that's what I'm always trying to do with my students. And something I felt was one of the most valuable things that I learned is that with any instrument, it really is, it starts with the human voice in our minds. And we're trying to make that hunk of plumbing, I've got a hunk of plumbing here, this hunk of plumbing, we're trying to turn it into as much human and vocal as possible. And the best players do that. And there's something about the voice and that singing approach that really catches our heart,
Yeah. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. That's a great way to wrap it up. And I love drawing that final correlation. because I think you're right. It's the lyric quality, right? And that's what's so special about a great opera orchestra like we have in Austin. Bob, I want to thank you for being here. This has been a really fun conversation. And I want to encourage everybody to send this to their friends and share it broadly so that everyone gets to experience it. If you didn't see our episode from last week, go back and do that. And I also want to just thank one more time our sponsors, HEB and Jim and Joe Green. Thanks for being with us, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you again very soon.